I spoke to Robert Barnett. He's a professor and senior research fellow at the University of London School of African Oriental Studies. I asked him why Beijing sees this Tibetan spiritual leader as a threat to national security.
It's probably based on what we can imagine Chinese leaders have nightmares about at night. And one is the possibility that a leader might arise inside Tibet or inside China who has more charisma than the Chinese leaders. And that's really the core of the Dalai Lama problem. As a religious leader, as a traditional leader, and as an international figure, he does have extraordinary ability to move a population, which he hasn't really used. He hasn't asked Tibetans to rise up, obviously. And I think that's a real problem for China. And in Chinese history, that has been a major threat to Chinese dynasties in the past, religious, charismatic leaders. And then there's a second factor. As a Marxist, the Chinese seem to think that backward people, that's how they probably see Tibetans and other minorities, they only follow the advice of a backward leader who they respect. So the Chinese feel they need a proxy spokesman, a tame Dalai Lama, who will tell Tibetans to follow Chinese rule. So that seems to be the two issues here.
Right. Now, you have spent time with the Dalai Lama. Listen, he seems to be a very amiable, compassionate man. He seems to be very jovial as well. I've often wondered, though, is he also politically savvy?
Oh, well, this is very easy to answer. He has many dimensions, many aspects. And when he's talking in English in public, he tends to be humorous, jovial, very lighthearted. He's always joking. It's very pleasant, wonderful. But when you're with him in private, or when he's talking in Tibetan to Tibetans, he's very stern, very severe, extremely focused. You go in to meet him and he will say immediately, what do you have to tell me? What do I need to know? What is your advice? And you feel this is someone who really listens and really goes to the essential questions at any point. So I think this is real leadership quality, actually. This is a kind of statesmanship that he has.
Now, China has announced that it will pick its own successor to the Dalai Lama. How will the Tibetan Buddhists in China take to this state-sanctioned living deity?
Well, the first question we have to ask, and I'm afraid it's a very real one, is whether they will even know that there is another Dalai Lama outside Tibet, as there will be now after the death of the current Lama. They may not know. China's basic policy in Tibet, it is a policy of repression, but the key thing is isolation. They're cutting off information. We can't contact them. They can't get news from outside. Very few Tibetans are allowed to travel now. They're not like the rest of China. They may find it hard, or of course intellectuals will find ways around the firewall, but a lot of people will not know that there is another Dalai Lama, should we say, an authentic Dalai Lama found through tradition. But if they do know, they're going to follow the one that is found through the tradition according to the wishes of the Dalai Lama. That's how religions work. You follow a religious leader. You don't follow the rules of a state. So China's going to have a problem convincing people inside Tibet that it really has this authority that it claims. And that may be why in the last 2-3 days, nothing, I think, has been published in Tibetan or Chinese in any Chinese media about the Dalai Lama's statement. It suggests a serious nervousness about people in Tibet finding out.
Very interesting there. Now, we know that Beijing has waged this ideological campaign against the Dalai Lama since, I think it is the 1990s or so. You know, they've painted him in a bad light. They've ensured that there is a strong Chinese social and economic presence in Tibet. Has this worked in favor for Beijing?
You know, when I went to Tibet the first time in the 80s as a tourist, I remember meeting people in Eastern Tibet who didn't know who the Dalai Lama was, ordinary Tibetan farmers and so on. That's impossible, really, absolutely impossible after the Chinese began this policy of insulting, denouncing the Dalai Lama in the 1990s. They made him famous. And they not only made him famous in Tibet, in a way that he wasn't before. All Tibetans knew this must be someone really significant. Otherwise, why are we all being forced by the Communist Party to denounce this person? So they created a massive base of knowledge and understanding and admiration for the Dalai Lama. And their attempts to denounce him led to hundreds of protests in Tibet in 2008, and over 150 people self-immolated in the years after that. So this is not a policy that succeeded. And I think in future years, in generations to come, Chinese leaders and Chinese scholars will say, who thought of this policy of insulting a major religious leader? This is always going to backfire.